Shalom, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to another Bible lesson here from the Ella Valley. As I said, this is going to be a series of lectures and lessons, Bible lessons and history lessons, since I'm in quarantine. So let's make this Corona quarantine and make it into a coronate, if there's a word for that. As I said to everybody, I had the COVID test, everything is fine. But again, according to the Israeli regulation, I need to be in quarantine because of my return from the United States. So this is going to be lecture number 2. Last lecture, we spoke about the actual structure of the Second Temple. We spoke about different locations of the Second Temple and different compounds in the Second Temple, such as Pool of Bethesda, Pool of Siloam, which is in the city of David, the Road of Ascents, the Southern Steps, Robinson Arch, Wilson Arch, Royal Basilica, and so on and so forth. And this time we are going to talk about the actual history of the mountain of Mount Moriah from the binding of Isaac all the way to the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 AD. This will be a first out of 2 lectures. The next lecture will be on Tuesday, same time, and that will cover the timing from the destruction all the way to our days today. So without further ado, let's dive in and learn about the temple. So let me share the screen with you. History of Temple Mount, for us to understand what are we talking about and what is the fuss is all about. So let's dive in. The first time we hear about Mount Moriah is actually in the book of Genesis, where God tested Abraham in the famous story of the binding of Isaac. And the name Moriah comes from 2 words, More, Yah, meaning God will instruct. Because God told Abraham, take your son to the place that I will show you. He didn't say, take your son to Mount Moriah. It said, he says, take your son to a place that I will show you. Hence the name Moriah, More, showing or teaching, Yah, the Lord, our God. So this is the first time we hear about Mount Moriah. The second time we hear about Mount Moriah is actually in the context of Erona, or as we say, Evona, the Jebusite, who dwelled in the outskirts of the city of David, back then the city of Jebus. And a little bit after the fact that David conquered Jebus, he wanted to build a house of the Lord in order for him to take the tabernacle and make it to a actual house of God. In order to do that, King David wanted to acquire a threshold by the threshold of Erona or Evona, the Jebusite. This is actually one of the most significant acts in the entire Bible in terms of the location of the house of God, because David was the king. He could just take the mountain to himself and that's it. But he said no. The place where the house of God will be built has to be a place of peace. This land must not have any blood on it, the same as when Abraham came to bind and to sacrifice Isaac. There was no bloodshed, no human blood was shed, of course the ram, but not human blood was shed. And this is the guideline that David used. Also, we have another similar act, and this is with Abraham, where he went to Ephroni from Hebron and he bought the cave of the patriarch. He was offered that as a gift, and he said, no, I will pay full money for that cave because of the holiness of it. Same thing goes here. So the threshold of Evona, was actually on the top of Mount Moriah, which the city of David is basically built on the slope of Mount Moriah from the south side. And in the time of David, the castle basically ended around here. You can see this is there. For those of you who've been to the city of David, this will be area G. This is the main support that held the citadel of Zion, which is here. Okay. Kidron Valley will be on our east. Theropeon or Central Valley will be on our west. Hinnom Valley will be in the south. And of course, Mount Moriah will be to the north. So the threshold of Erona was around here at this area. When we look at the maps, and we try to analyze what is the reason why David chose Jerusalem in general, but and also Mount Moriah in particular to the house of God. Of course, the one first reason for that will be a divine intervention. It was this is the place where God told Abraham, sacrifice your son, your only son, in the place that I will show you. But as we know, in the Bible, there's always a reason. There was never a coincidence in the Bible. Actually, in the Hebrew language, the word coincidence doesn't exist. The closest will be tzeruf mikrim, which basically is translated to two words, tzeruf mikrim, not one word as a coincidence. So there's no such thing as a coincidence in the Bible. When we are looking at the map, if you look here at the map of the tribes, you can see very, very well that Jerusalem, and this map is actually on the auspice of the tribe of Benjamin, which was not the case because Jerusalem was a neutral city, did not belong to anybody, to any of the tribes. We know that Jerusalem was conquered by Joshua. However, there were not enough people in the tribes of Judea, so they did not inherit the land, which means the Jebusite came back and reclaimed the city and waited actually until David to return. Now we need to understand the political climax of the time, and one of the main reasons why David chose Jerusalem to be his eternal capital. If we look at the tribes here, we have two main players here. We have the tribe of Benjamin. You see the city of Gibeon, Jericho is on the auspices of Benjamin. And we have the city of the tribe of Judah, which was the largest tribe. However, not the strongest tribe. Not the strongest tribe. This place here we see Ephraim, where Shiloh was destroyed by the Philistines. At the time of Saul, the tribe of Benjamin stretched all the way up to Shiloh. Shiloh was actually under the auspices of Benjamin. If you remember book of Judges 19, the story of the concubine in Gibeah, there were three attempts done by the entire nation of Israel to destroy the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin was the strongest tribe. Only on the third attempt, the whole nation of Israel was able to defeat Benjamin. The first king of Israel is, of course, Saul, and Saul came from the tribe of Benjamin. So we need to dive in and understand the political climate. We actually now in a situation that Saul died. He has no one to take his throne because his children, apart from Mephibosheth, they all died on Mount Gilboa. And we basically have two factions that are pulling to get the throne. We have the house of Saul, tribe of Benjamin, and we have the house of David, tribe of Judah. The capital of David is actually Hebron, not Jerusalem. Why did David decided to use Jerusalem as his capital? This is what makes David one of the greatest kings in history. David said, I will use Jerusalem as a glue between all the tribes. Look at this. We have, as we said, tribe of Benjamin right over here, tribe of Judah right over here. Jerusalem is in the middle. David could have established his capital in Hebron, and then his people of Judah would be very happy. He could have established his capital in Shiloh or Shiloh, like the ancient capital, and then the people of Benjamin and Ephraim will be happy. But he wanted to make everybody happy. So that's why he chose Jerusalem, which was a Jebusite city, for his capital. If we look, let me move myself a little bit. If we look at the map right here of Jerusalem, basically this dotted line is the line of the city walls of today. The city walls that you see today in Jerusalem, they are brand new. They are from 1536 AD. In Israeli term, that's yesterday. So those walls are basically built on top of the Crusader walls, which we'll talk about on Tuesday, and they are not biblical. Those walls, though, cause a lot of confusion and a lot of misinterpretation of scriptures, because up until the late 19th century, the entire city of David, which is down to the south of Temple Mount, which was outside of city walls, was not known to the research. So we have a lot of places in the wall of Jerusalem today that are mistakenly understood as biblical sites. For example, Mount Zion. Mount Zion of today will be in this area, right here as I'm pointing. However, Mount Zion in the Bible will be in the city of David, city of Zion. So please disregard this dotted line. This is a new line. This is 1536. Let's look at the three main progress of the city. This is stage number one. You see, I'm moving here with a cursor. You can see that this is the city of David, where David conquered that from the Jebusites. When David got into the city, this is what he saw. Later on, we have King Solomon that expanded and built the temple out on Mount Moriah, where Araunah's threshold used to be. So in the time of Solomon, the city would have looked like this. All the city of David, including Mount Moriah. Later on, we have a huge expansion of the city, which will be the whole western wall over here, also known as the Mishnah. All of this is basically the extension of the city from the time of King Hezekiah. Why is that? When King Hezekiah reigned in Judea, the kingdom of Jerusalem was destroyed, and we had a massive wave of refugees coming from Israel and from all of Judea to find refuge in Jerusalem. The city itself was too small to inhabit all the people, so King Hezekiah basically put them on the western hill, which is right here called the Mishnah. Today, most of the Jewish quarter and the Armenian quarter, this is where the houses of the refugees used to be. And he basically barricaded the wall around the whole hill, or what we call the western hill, known today as Mount Zion. It's not the Mount Zion of the Bible, it's Mount Zion of the Byzantines. So this wall that you see right over here basically extended to the west and actually made the city of Jerusalem 4 times the size of it. When we read in the Bible the accounts of Rabshakeh, the chancellor of war of Assyria, these are the walls that he's seen. When you visit today in Jerusalem and you see the wide wall in the Jewish quarter, these are the walls that he has seen. One of the greatest moments in the Bible is actually the buildup of the first temple by King Solomon. King Salomon, as we know, was the last king of the United Kingdom. And after him, of course, Rehoboam was the one who separated the tribe of Judah and Benjamin and Manasseh. One of the greatest achievements of King Solomon was the building of the house of God. Solomon built the first temple on the site where his father, King David, wanted to build, which is again Araunah's threshold, also as we know as Mount Moriah. This was one of the most lavish and most extravagant buildings in basically the entire Middle East. However, it was not at the same size as the second temple, which we will talk about in a second. The Bible is very clear about the dimension of the temple, the purpose of the temple, the layout of the temple. For example, we all know about the Yam, which is the main water reservoir with the 12 oxes representing the 12 tribes. We know about the 2 pillars, the Boaz and Yachin, on both sides of the veil to the entrance of the temple. So the Bible is very specific about the actual planning of the temple. Something quite interesting, when we read in 1 Kings 5, we read about the fact that Hiram, king of Tyre, who was a very good friend of King David, and also a very good friend of Solomon, what he did, he sent stonemasons and workers and woodcraft and also timbers from Lebanon to build the house of God. This is something quite amazing to see, because when we look at the structure of the first temple, folks, this is the first temple, not the second temple. When we look at the structure of the first temple, we can see the Yam right here, the main water reservoir that was used to clean the blood of the sacrifice. We have the main altar, which in this picture is not correct because there are stairs. And if you remember in scriptures, we're not allowed to have stairs, as I said in the presentation before, because if you have stairs and you are walking up, your private parts will be shown underneath. So you have to have a ramp, not stairs. So actually, this computer images, as much as it is nice as it is, has some default in it. For example, also inside, when you look inside into the holies of holies, there are again drawings of animals, which could not have been in the house of God because of the second commandment. They should not have any drawing, any picture, any statue. So that could not have been inside the holies of holies, especially not inside the temple. If we look very carefully, right here we have a Phoenician temple from Syria, or actually from Lebanon, in the area of Baalbek. And as we look at the entrance of the temple of God that was built by King Hiram and by Solomon, and we see the Phoenician temple, there's a very much resemblance between the two. We have to remember that the kingdom of Judea and the kingdom of Israel had very strong contact and connection with the Phoenicians. Actually, when we all remember that Jezebel was a Phoenician princess, but we're now talking about the tribe of Judah, not about Israel. One of the wives of Solomon probably had a connection to the Phoenician kingdom, Tyre being one of the largest cities of the Phoenician, Tyre and Sidon. And that is why Hiram sent the timber and the stonemason to build a temple to our God. Amazing to see how this political connection affected so much the actual structure, physical structure of the house of the Lord, in comparison to a Phoenician style of building of their own temples. So again, this is a Phoenician temple right over here versus our temple right over here. A lot of resemblance. When we look at the actual structure of the first temple, let's review that again. We have the main stairs going up to a small plateau. We had two pillars, Boaz and Yachin. We had the central temple itself, and where we have the holies of holies called the Dvir, which was in the back behind the veil. This was where the priest on Day of Atonement would have come in to do sacrifice and to do offering and meditation only on one day during the year, which was the Day of Atonement. If we look at this 3D model, again, we can see the problem of the stairs right here. Couldn't be stairs, had to be a ramp. We do have the Yam, the main or sea in English. That was the main water reservoir that held the water in order to clean the blood. Actually, underneath Temple Mount, there are abundant of water cisterns that contain a huge amount of water. Some of them are dated to the first temple period. If you're going to go today in the tunnels underneath City of David, all the way up to the Davidson Center, if you will continue into Temple Mount, you will stumble upon a huge water reservoir that was built by King Josiah. That water reservoir, which will be, if this is Temple Mount, it will be around here, right underneath it, not on underneath the actual temple, but a little bit to the west of it. And this water reservoir was basically used to clean the blood. When we see such a huge water reservoir dated to King Josiah, that explains a lot the reformation of Josiah and the returning of all sacrifice into the house of God in Jerusalem, exactly as the Bible describes it. So the temple itself stood from around the year 957 BCE before Common Era, or you can say also BC, meaning before Christ. So anywhere between 957 BCE till 586 BCE, the destruction of the temple by the Babylonians. Inside, as we said, inside the Holies of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant, holding the manna, Aaron's staff, and the Ten Commandments. And many people ask me, what do I think what happened to the Ark of the Covenant? Now, this, for me, is my understanding. It doesn't mean that this is what happened, but that's what I see. We need to remember that one of the women of Solomon was the daughter of Pharaoh. Shishak that we hear about in Second Chronicles, also in Book of Kings. But Shishak was a military commander that betrayed his master in Egypt and basically overthrown Pharaoh, the father of the daughter of Pharaoh that we know from the Bible, the wife of Solomon. This Shishak basically made a military coup and took the throne of Egypt. And in order to fund his acts and his deeds, he went on on a pillage campaign, not in order to conquer and gain new land and new taxes. He basically was a thief. He came up to steal possessions from conquered cities. That's basically it. And when he went up via Judah, he knew about the vast treasures of King Solomon, and he went to the temple and demanded Rehoboam to give him the vessel of the temple. And as we read, so Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem and took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king house. He took everything. He also carried away the gold shield which Solomon had made. I'm putting down here my emphasis on the word he took everything, everything, including the Ark of the Covenant. So when people ask me, where do I think the Ark of the Covenant is, if it's in Ethiopia, if it's in the Vatican, if it's, with Indiana Jones, it was probably, I think, either was melted down by Shishak or it's in Egypt somewhere. That would be my educated guess. The temple itself, of course, was destroyed by the Babylonians in the year 586 BCE. What happened was we had a puppet king by the name Zedekiah, and his main prophet was Jeremiah. They didn't like each other so much. And basically, Zedekiah, or in Hebrew, Tzidkiah, revolted against his masters, the king of Babylonia, King Nebuchadnezzar, and opened an open revolt while he is relying on Egypt to help him. That's a major mistake that he did. And when the Babylonians came over, they had ransacked, destroyed, and burned down the temple. And what they did, they took Zedekiah and his sons to Babylonia. They killed each and every one of his sons and then blinded him. Actually, one of the worst ways to die in scriptures. But that was the end of the kingdom of Jerusalem, or the kingdom of Judah, for 70 years. After 70 years, we have, of course, the return of Zion with Ezra, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, and so on and so forth. But the city itself was leveled and burned down to the ground in the year 586 BCE. And we have many, many, many remains, especially in the city of David, of thick layer of ash from the destruction of Nebuchadnezzar. So if we take that layer of ash and we examine the organic material using carbon-14 isotope, we stumble to the year 586 BCE, exactly as the Bible describes it. After the return of Zion by Ezra and Nehemiah and the rebuilding of the wall builders of Nehemiah around the city of Jerusalem, Zerubbabel got the permission to build the second temple. The second temple was not built by King Herod. That's a common mistake. Second temple was built actually by Zerubbabel. So it was a very small temple because the population of Judea was very, very poor, and the elite and the nobility actually stayed in Babylonia. And we know from scriptures that when Zerubbabel and the people of Judea finished building the temple, they have wept because they remembered the magnificent and finesse of the first temple. So this is the year around 516 BCE, as we said, 70 years after the exile, meaning the grandson or the great-grandsons of those who were in captivity in Babylonia returned to rebuild the city of David and the second temple. If we're looking at comparison between the temple of Solomon and the temple of Herod, the Temple of Herod was actually the largest religious structure in the entire Roman Empire. I'm going to repeat that. It was the largest religious structure in the entire Roman Empire. It was a place of awe and wonder that drew a lot of non-Jews. They didn't come to the temple to worship our God. They came to the temple to be in awe and in magnificent of that amazing structure. We actually have several accounts about it, which are non-biblical, from Josephus all the way to Plinius, that speaks about the magnificence of the temple of Herod. What Herod did, basically, he shaved off the mountain. He built a box around Mount Moriah, and on top of that, he built the second temple. Before we go to the actual structure of the second temple, let's look at this comparison. This is the temple of Solomon. We have here the main altar. We have the yam and the water reservoirs, and that's basically it. There's no women chamber. There's no stairs of the, well, there are stairs of the Levi, but there's no inner court, outer court, Jews, non-Jews. And basically the temple itself was about 1/3 of the size of the temple of Herod. We need to remember also that in the time of Solomon, this temple, our temple, was on a top of a hill, not on top of Temple Mount. That plateau that we see today, that box of Temple Mount, is much later addition that was built by King Herod. So in order for us to see how it looked like in the time of Jesus and a little bit after, we have here the city of David, which, as we saw before, was the foundation of Jerusalem. Then we have the Hulda Gate, or the southern excavation, the southern entrance, the royal basilica, the temple itself, the Antonia. All of this is the western wall. These walls that we see here were built on top of the ancient walls of King Hezekiah. Remember the Mishnah and the Western Hill. So this was built on top of the walls of King Hezekiah. In the time of Jesus, this will be the second wall right here when we have the Theropeon, second wall, Pool of Bethesda. This is the time of Jesus. This extension, what we know as the third wall, was basically a wall that was added in the revolt against Rome, basically surrounding the whole north part, which is called Betzeta, which was the northern neighborhood of Jerusalem, a little bit after Jesus. So right here, until this dotted line here, this will be until the year, give or take, 66 AD. This is what Jesus have seen. All of this extension is in the year 70 AD, in preparation of the siege of Jerusalem. Let's analyze now the actual complex of Temple Mount. When we look carefully into this drawing, we need to just to get a little bit of orientation. We have here Mount Olives to the east. We have here what is today the old city, which is today within the city walls, and we have here the city of David, where we see here the word Ophel from the word to go up, leha apil, to ascend. These are the stairs of ascent. Down here we have the Robinson Arch. This little part right over here, this is what we see today when we visit. Here at the Barclay Gate, next to the Barclay Gate, this is where we understand where Jesus tossed the booth of the money changers. If you look at all of this structure around us, look very carefully. It's basically like a shoebox that was built around the actual topography of the mountain of Mount Moriah. So Mount Moriah is basically concealed into this box. You have a lot of empty chambers. These are the very famous Solomon stables that we hear about so much. These are basically topographically, these are the slopes of Mount Moriah, that what Herod did, he built arches. If this is the mount itself, he built arches in order for him to create a plateau, and then he built the temple on top of the plateau. What Herod did, he basically shaved off the temple of Zerubbabel, completely shaved it off, and he built on top of that his magnificent building, the temple of God. So in a way, we can say that the second temple was leveled by Herod, but not in an act of war. It was renovated. That is why technically it is the third temple. That Jesus saw the third temple, but that third temple is not considered as the third temple because it was renovated. So it wasn't destroyed and rebuilt. It was renovated to the ground. If we're going to strip this box, what we will see, we're going to have the Royal Basilica right over here. These are the main entrances, what we call as the Hulda gates. This is Gate Beautiful right here. Those two gates, Gate Beautiful. entered into the main courtyard of the temple. This is where the temple used to be. And then we have the Antonia Fortress, which is in the north part of the complex. This is a little bit of a better view of what we just saw. So again, we have the Southern Steps, the Ophel, Robinson Arch, that big interchange that brought million people into the complex. We have the Wilson Gate that led from the upper city for the priest and the nobility to go straight into the temple. We have the Jews section, the non-Jews section. This line here was actually found in the Sifter project. It was actually found saying, "Do not, if you're not Jewish, do not cross beyond this point." We have the women courtyard. We have here the steps of the Levites, the main temple itself, and of course the holies of holies. Just again to remind us all of the four retaining walls are in existence from the time of Jesus, all of them. The reason why the western wall is the most important, because it is closest to the holies of holies, right over here. The holies of holies was facing to the west, so the western wall is the closest to the holies of holies. This is a picture that was taken at the Israel Museum overlooking from the east to the west on Temple Mount. So this is what we saw before, but on a physical model. Again, the steps of Hulda, the southern steps, going into the royal basilica. This is where Jesus confronted the leaders of the Pharisees. Then to the main courtyard, into the women's section and the stairs of the Levites, and then into the holies of holies. Okay. In continuation, we have here the Antonia Fortress. And for those of you with sharp eye, you can see the line of the walls that I just showed about 2 slides ago. These are the lines of the walls from the time of Jesus, right here. These are the walls from the time of the Great Revolt, in the year 70 AD. 2 more places which are very important to our story is the Pool of Bethesda, which is right here, the healing of the lame, and the Pool of Siloam, which is the end of this street, all the way down the healing of the blind in John 9. Again, the structure itself of Temple Mount, you can see that this is the summit of Temple Mount. These are the stairs of the Levites right over here. This is what we see. This one is here, and this section is here, right here. So we have the main women's section. We have the stairs of the Levites with the trumpets, and then you enter into the holies of holies. Women's section, stairs of the Levites, holies of holies, main altar here, main altar, right over here. Okay, so this is the second temple by King Herod. This is the structure that Jesus had seen when he came to Jerusalem. How do we know that this is how the temple looked like? Actually, a coin was found from the Bar Kokhba revolt, which was about 70 years after the destruction of the temple, 60 years after the destruction of the temple. And that coin has the face of the temple with the pillars. So that is the main reason why most of the drawing or interpretation of the temple will look like this. It actually doesn't come from just pure imagination. It comes from coins that we have found in Judea, not in Jerusalem, because Jews were not allowed to live in Jerusalem, but in the outskirts, especially in a place called Beitar, which is about 7 miles south of Jerusalem. In the year 70 AD, Vespasian and his armies, together with Titus, entered into the city after a long siege. They broke the walls. So if we see the map of the city here, we have Temple Mount, we have City of David, which is called the lower city now. We have the upper hill and the Mishnah. This is where we have the second quarter. This is the walls from the time of Jesus. And the new city is basically the extension of the city from the time of Jesus. It's from the time of the revolt, I'm sorry, from the year 70 AD. We have several camps. If you see that, we have the first main camp of the 10th Legion. We have 2 more camps of the 10th and the 6th Legion that besieged Jerusalem, mostly the 10th Legion, the 10th Fretensis. And the way what happened was that when the Romans besieged the city, there was an attempt by the Jews. These blue arrows are movement of the Jewish revolt. There was an attempt by the Jews to go and attack the Romans outside the city walls, an attempt that was failed. And what happened was that the Romans came from the west, entered into the new city, burned down the new city, then from there through the Antonia got into the temple and the second quarter. And after they have conquered the temple, they went down to the lower city and to the city of David, which until today we can find remains of the people that dwelled in the ditches and in the crevices beneath the streets, which is a shocking find, especially on the main street, the Pilgrim Street that led between the Pool of Siloam all the way up to Temple Mount. We actually found cooking pots and actually human remains of those rebels that hid there from the Romans. And we know from the accounts of Josephus Flavius how the Romans went and broke the tiles of the floor to find refugees. In one of the accounts, Josephus says that more than 20,000 Jews found their death in the crevices and the tunnels underneath the city. So the city itself was completely in ruin in the year 70 AD. And what happened was it actually was elevated. The ground level of the streets were elevated because of all these debris. If you look down here, this is from the western wall. This is what we call the Ophel, okay, the southern excavation. And this here are basically the debris of the outer wall of the temple. This is not the temple itself; it's the outer wall of the temple that came tumbling down, and for 2,000 years was buried underground. The ground level up until the late 80s was actually here. This is Robinson Arch. All of this was excavated only in the 1980s AD. And this is the only remain that we have from the Robinson Arch. We have pictures of travelers who bind their horses to the top of this arch because this was all underground, as amazing as it sounds. One of the most amazing discoveries that was found a Hebrew inscription, same Hebrew as we have today, which just says lebet hatki'ah le, to announce, to call. This is the place of the trumpet. That's what it says. This is the place of the trumpet, that here you announce the birth of the moon, you announce a new month, you announce an end of the month, you announce a Shabbat is coming. Until today, when you're in Jerusalem, you're going to hear the siren going on Shabbat. It's not because of security, it's because Shabbat is coming, and this tradition comes from the temple that the Levi used to blow the shofar to announce Shabbat. All of these, what you see here, can be seen today in Jerusalem. This is in situ, in sight. You go and see it at the Southern Excavation, at the Davidson Center. By the way, all of our groups go there to see these amazing remains of the temple complex. One of the most moving drawing or moving statues that we have is in the Arch of the Triumph that was built in Rome, erected in Rome, to commemorate the defeat of Jerusalem. We have to remember, Jerusalem was not a small province. In terms of size, it was not that big, but in terms of wealth, it was one of the wealthiest provinces in the entire Roman Empire. And when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, they used the money. They had so much money that they used the money to build the Colosseum. Colosseum was built from the temple money. Hence the connection. The connection is unbelievable between Rome and Judea. In the drawing here, we see Roman soldiers. These are not Jewish slaves. These are Roman soldiers with victorious leaves, victorious crowns, holding the vessels of the temple. One of them is the menorah. Funny thing is that the person who made this drawing never seen the menorah, because the base of the menorah here has animals on it. And as we said in the first one of the first slides, you could not have, I'm sorry, you could not have a picture of an animal on the base of the menorah in the temple of God because of the second commandment. We know today for a fact that the menorah had a tripod, not a octagonal base. So the person who made this drawing just heard about the menorah. He never seen it. Amazingly enough, when the state of Israel was reborn, we used our symbol as of the menorah taken from the Titus Gate in Rome, because we didn't have the excavation, knowing today that the base of the menorah was a tripod. So it's a historical mistake that the state of Israel did because of lack of knowledge. So again, next time you are in Rome and you see this, you can say, nope, this is not how it looked like. The menorah itself, the base was a tripod. You can see that also in Tzipori, in the finding in Tzipori and in Magdala, the tripod. So we just covered now the basically from the time of Abraham through David, Irona threshold to Solomon, Rehoboam, Shishak, Hezekiah, Zedekiah, Zerubbabel, Ezra and Nehemiah, King Herod, Jesus, and of course the destruction of the temple. After the temple was destroyed in the year 70 AD, for many people, they said this is the end of Judaism and this is the end of the covenant with God. Many people thought that that's it. There's no more. There's no more Israel. Funny enough that we say that, and today is the year 2020, and I'm in the state of Israel, in the Ela Valley, where everything began, and I'm able to give you this presentation. Was that the end, or was that just a continuation? So in our next presentation on Tuesday, we will cover what had happened from the time of the destruction, from the year 70 AD. We'll pick up from that last slide of the blazing temple all the way till today, till the year 2020. So hope that you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope you will all tune in on Tuesday for the second part of this presentation. If you have any question whatsoever, please email us at info@tbctl.com. It's an acronym of The Bible Comes to Life. You can also check us on Facebook, The Bible Comes to Life, and of course our website, which is free of charge. All the usage of all the movies over there are free of charge, which is tbctl.com. So until Tuesday, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Omer Eshel, and shalom and goodbye from the Ela Valley.